I think we have officially a quorum. And for those joining us virtually, just so you know, I can't see you. So if you have a comment or a question, just interrupt me and we'll go with that. So let's begin with our action items. The first item is the approval of the February 7th meeting minutes. Hopefully you've had a chance to review those. And if so, we'd entertain a motion to approve those minutes.
I'll move to approve. Deb White.
Second, Denise Colpack.
All right, we have a first and second. Any discussion? Hearing none. All of those in favor of the motion signify by saying yes.
Aye.
Aye.
Yes.
Yes.
Opposed? All right, motion's carried. Next item is 2B, is the Moorhead Title 6 plan update. Sean and Lori.
Do we not have the PowerPoint?
Oh, yeah, we need the PowerPoint. It's on, oh, we can't see it. Uh-huh. Okay, well, I have
Oh, you mean just right here?
technology. Ah,
There it is. We can see it now.
Do you want me to start?
go ahead, Sean. Yep.
So every 3 years, the federal grant recipients are required to submit a Title VI program. Moorhead's Title VI program is due to expire May 31st of 2024. The Title VI program includes any notices to the public of protections against discrimination afforded by Title VI, as well as a list of their locations. A Title VI discrimination complaint form and instructions to the public on how to complete it. A list of any public transportation-related Title VI investigations, complaints, or lawsuits filed with the recipient since the time of the last submission. A public participation plan, including outreach to minority and limited English proficient populations within the service area, may also include other traditionally underserved constituencies, such as people with disabilities and low-income populations. The recipient's plan for assistant persons with limited English proficiency, the recipient's service standards and service policies, and any additional relevant information that demonstrates adherence to Title VI regulations. The request is for the MAC Coordinating Board to recommend to the Moorhead City Council approval of the 2024 Title VI program and submission to the FTA.
Also, we provided in the packet some examples of some of the pieces that are in our Title VI plan. We didn't include the entire one because it's how many pages? 600?
It's about over 600
Oh, wow.
pages.
Yeah. So for every time we do anything to outreach to the public, we have an example of what we've done for social media on our webpage and all of the pieces that we've done to reach out to them. So that's why there's so many pages to the Title VI plan itself. If you have any questions, we'd be happy to answer them.
All right, questions from the board for Lori or Sean?
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Deb.
Thank you, Lori, Sean. I think it was very thorough from what I can tell. And I recall when I've looked at this before, and I appreciate the examples that you showed us of even some of the signage that we post. My only thought, I know you do things you have in there for opportunities for public input. Are we doing any sort of direct consultation with some of the organizations in our community that might have better expertise than some of us on, like, for instance, working with folks with language issues with language proficiency that might maybe notice some of the blind spots that may not be as apparent to some of us that are in the decision-making positions?
I have done some outreach to different organizations in town that work with minority populations, including the last one I sent, like an informational letter to them regarding MapBus. I have included some free passes to distribute to their clients. The last one being, I believe it's called Global Refuge, where they deal with different minority populations coming into the country. So I have been doing some of that outreach.
Great, thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions? Okay, the recommended motion is on the 2B.
Strand makes a recommended motion.
We have a first,
I'll second.
a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion is carried. All right, item 2C, route and service changes. Cole and Lori.
Thank you. For those that have been on the board for a couple of years now, many of you are probably aware that we've been suffering some driver shortages since about 2021. Over the last couple of years, we've enacted quite a few changes to be able to address that in our service levels to make sure that we have enough drivers out there to consistently provide reliable service to our passengers. Since 2020 and post-COVID, we've noticed a pretty large decrease in ridership. Pre-pandemic levels, we had approximately 1.8 million rides, and post-COVID, we are at about 1.2 from last year's data. So, combination of having a difficulty in maintaining and employing new drivers and the ridership decreases that we have seen have kind of led us to look towards making some of our route changes permanent. Over the last couple of years, we've done our best to make sure that routes aren't taken away entirely from different sections of the community, just reducing frequency so they just occur less often. So our recommended motion at the end of all this is to hold a public hearing to enact a list of changes that we'll go through on the next couple of slides here. With that, we'll definitely look towards community input, ridership demographics, taking a look at trends going further to see if any of the recommended service cuts that we have coming up would be either reduced or reinstated in the future. So for this slide here, you can take a look at the list of permanent changes that we are looking to enact. The first one being ending our service at 10:15 p.m. Monday through Friday. Previously, our services went until 11:15 p.m. Over the last couple of years, we have tracked ridership data and just found that it's a very small percentage of our ridership happens between that 10:15 p.m. and 11:15 p.m. So just not much of a demand there. Similarly, we have enacted reduced service on Saturdays ending at 8:15 p.m. Again, overall, comparatively to Monday through Friday service, we have seen that Saturday service is generally lower in terms of ridership. So those last couple of hours at the end of the night don't see quite as much as they do during the day and during the weekdays as well. Route 15 is one of our most popular routes in the service. Previously, we had reduced it to 30-minute service all day. I believe it was probably about a year ago, we reinstated a additional bus during middays to help with those peak service times. And then actually starting yesterday, we added a second midday bus. So we'll have 4 vehicles out there currently from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. to help with kind of that midday rush, 2 vehicles in the morning, 2 vehicles in the afternoon to kind of accommodate with those rides. Previously, we did have 4 vehicles out there from 6:15 until about 6 p.m. So this permanent reduction would just be those 6:15 to 9:45 a.m. hours. Based on requests from NDSU, we have elected to suspend routes 32W and Route 32W is a request from NDSU. That was suspended a couple of years back based on lack of ridership from that area of the college. And then we internally elected to suspend Route 36. Route 36 is just a smaller version of Route 13, which services the NDSU campus. The difference being that Route 36 is specifically for the NDSU campus. Route 13 services more portions of northern Fargo. So reducing or eliminating Route 36 allowed us to put a second vehicle back on Route 13 to increase the service to a more or a larger portion of the population outside of the campus. So that's something that we are looking to permanently keep. There'll still be the 2 vehicles on Route 30 Route 13 to be able to service the campus and North Fargo. Another request from NDSU was to reduce Route 33 to 10-minute service all day. Previously, we had 10-minute service with a bus during peak times, which decreased it to 7-minute service. Based on ridership trends, those 2 vehicles that are out there for the 10-minute service is still enough to be able to provide service to the college kids. Route 33 goes from NDSU's main campus down to the downtown campuses of Barry and Clay Hall. So the 2 vehicles on there are still able to maintain the ridership demand. And then similarly, Route 13, like I said before, services the NDSU campus and northern parts of Fargo. With that, we are looking to reduce it from 30-minute service, so 2 vehicles on the route, to 60-minute service, or 1 vehicle on the route during Saturdays only, again, based on ridership demand. And then there are still a few routes that we're looking to reinstate in the future. Our goal is to continue efforts to increase our overall amount of drivers that we have. With that, we're looking to restore 15-minute service on routes 11 and 14. Currently, we have 3 vehicles on the route, and then that's just increasing it back up to 4 total. We currently have Route 16 Saturday service suspended. Again, due to trends in ridership, that is one of our lower performing routes on Saturdays, but we are looking to reinstate that and give that route an opportunity to be out there for the passengers that utilize it. And then I don't know if you want to talk about Route 2 during the MSUM here.
Yeah, previously, we had temporarily suspended the second bus on Route 2, which goes through MSUM campus. It only comes on in the afternoon during our peak service from 2:30 to 6:30 during the academic year, Monday through Friday. We would like to reinstate that one as well or not reinstate that one.
No, reinstate in the
Reinstate.
future.
Okay, sorry, I forgot. Reinstate that one. Should we get enough drivers back again?
So, as I had said before, we'll definitely keep track of ridership and demand from the public, taking all that in count once we plan to enact these changes. If we see ridership trends or demand for certain areas of the city, we may look at revising some of these changes or potentially adding on additional services to other areas of town that we don't currently service. But for now, our requested motion is for MAPA staff members to hold a public hearing to permanently adopt the previously mentioned changes.
I also like to mention too that in 2025, we'll begin our new 5-year transit development plan. And that time we'll engage the public and see what future services they would like to have. So hopefully by then, our changes to payroll and our increase that we've done for weekend and evening service pay differential will help us fill in some of those driver gaps, and it'll settle down and we can put some more service on the street.
Okay, questions for Cole and Lori? Deb.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I wanted to talk to you a little bit about the 10:15 proposed end of service. And I absolutely understand the challenges we've had with driver shortages, but I also want to make sure we're not doing things that might further exacerbate the workforce shortage that we have in the region too. And so have we looked at data to see if there are certain areas where we do see a higher usage? And I'm thinking about things where, people are working that second shift, 3 to 11, and now would not have that ability to maybe, stay in those same jobs. And so we might lose workers or have a harder time retaining and recruiting new folks to take on some of those shifts. If so, would it be a possibility of considering a more nuanced, like we might for many routes end at 10:15, but if we have some that we see a higher need, that we could keep those routes going up until the current time of 11:15. And obviously, I will support having a public hearing.
Sure. So I guess one thing that we noticed in terms of ridership trends since we've made the transition from 11:15 to 10:15 p.m. is a lot of those late riders have shifted up an hour. That's to say that there might be some that are affected by that change, but after we enacted that, I don't believe that we had heard really any sort of requests to extend service back to that 11:15 hour, requests for change. I guess that is something that's possible to consider. We could potentially have routes out there to 11:15 without not necessarily having all routes, but without having the data offhand, I want to say that it's about 1.5 to 2% of our general ridership for the day comes from that 1 hour, or did previously come from that hour. So
Also, just changing some of the routes becomes difficult because you don't know where they live. So even though, it might be an area has, is still open later, the routes where they live may not be conducive to a lot of rides at that time of night. So that makes it a little bit more difficult to determine, how to do some routes and not others.
And then one other thing that I can add to that too, part of the reason that we had initially looked from reducing service from 11:15 to 10:15 is that we were noticing that post-pandemic businesses were just closing earlier. So businesses like Walmart or West Acres or a lot of the local grocery stores that were previously, either 24/7 or ending at midnight had been ending either 10:15, or West Acres, I believe, ends at 8 nowadays. So it's kind of a just different times, I guess.
Well, and I'll add, it's kind of a catch-22 because part of it was because they couldn't fill positions, and so they didn't have the workers. But now, if we make it harder for them to get the workers, but I know it's not. There's no easy answers for this. But I think it would be good to even just consult with some local members of our business community just to see if there was a way to meet that need. And maybe there's. I agree, Lori. It's I'm not sure even if we kept that one route, if we'd be able to then get them to their houses because the other routes would be ending earlier.
Any update on the driver shortage? I know we talked a little bit about last meeting, but kind of any progress on, I know that you're continuing to work on that, but what are you seeing as far as applicants and any change in that area?
We just put service back on. I'll let Cole.
Yeah, so as I had mentioned previously, we did add an additional vehicle to Route 15 for midday peak service. And then we are also returning service to Routes 6 and 9 on Saturdays, so servicing the Dilworth and Moorhead populations. Based on what we've heard from our contractor Transdev, they are receiving quite a few additional applicants in the application process, a lot more drivers in driver training. There are some difficulties in transitioning from driver training to actual full-time drivers, but that's kind of just a product of what the job is, more or less. But yeah, we have seen increased amounts in applicants, and we have seen a slight increase in overall drivers that we're able to reinstate some of our services. So good news with that.
Okay, any other questions from the board? Okay, if not, there's a recommended motion.
I'll make the motion. Denise Kolpak.
Wait seconds.
We have a first and second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion is approved. Next, we'll move on to agenda item 3, the informational items. First up is 3A, Transit Reorganization Study Update. Julie and Lori.
Thank you, Cole.
Bring it down a little. Good morning.
Good morning.
What we wanted to do is give you an update on the transit or MAP bus reorganization study that we're having KLJ do. It's been quite the study going over all these details. So what we want to do is just look at funding, how that's been impacted based on our change to a large UZA from a small UZA. And that was the 200,000 magic number that switched. So our $5307 that are capital and operating that are an appropriation that we get from the feds. Last year in 2023, so federal fiscal year compared to this year, and I have the amounts there that we're anticipating getting. So far, Congress has only allocated 5/12 of the total amount. But based on our forecast of what they have released for information, these are the numbers that we'll be getting. It's about 19% less than we had received in 2023, which is disappointing. But it is what they're working on. 5310 is capital that we have used in the past for our mobility management services and some vehicle purchases. And that will now come directly to Fargo since we are the designated recipient in the area, but it's for use throughout the metro area. Normally, it's through the state, and the dollar amounts are higher. So this is the amount we anticipate for the whole metro area that we will be receiving in 5310 money. We still have access to the state allocation that comes through. If there's additional funding we want to request through them. Of course, it's just capital. And then, which I didn't put on this slide, but 5339 is another capital program that comes to us directly now, and it used to go through the states. And that will be for the metro area again. We do not have any information yet as of putting this slide together on what they're going to be making available. But we will be able to go to the state again if there is additional funding that we require.
Can I add to that? So
Certainly.
that's North Dakota. That says you can go to them for that. 5339 is bus and bus facility capital purchases. But the state of Minnesota does not have enough money to cover the state of Minnesota's needs right now. And so they are not looking at sharing any of that capital money with Moorhead. They are looking at the potential of putting in some state money in replacement for that as needs come up. But at this point, don't expect to share their 5339 with Moorhead.
Yes, even the amounts that are even made available at times are not enough to meet the needs. So we postpone capital purchases based on the funding that's available out there. Normally, or, a kind of a guideline is 80% federal funding with 20% local match. So say if we want to buy a bus. And Fargo has just purchased 9 buses, Moorhead has purchased 1 with a consortium with Duluth. And what we will be getting from those buses is, and it's kind of a mixed bag, but generally it's 80, and now the feds have gone up to 85%, so it's a 15% local match. Those buses should be coming in about a month, I think.
End of month.
Oh,
Oh,
wow, okay.
by the end.
Okay, thank you, Jordan. So, and believe me, we need them. The vehicles have been, like I was saying, postponed due to funding and availability. There's been some real supply chain issues with buses. So getting those actually ordered and in our bus fleet and able to be utilized is highly significant, but a process that was delayed by about 3 to 4 years. So the current buses that we have, some of them, Jordan's magnificent staff has been able to keep them running, even as some of the interesting things that are going on, like frames and floors resting out. So we're excited to get the new buses. And those are all coming through capital grants again. So it's important that we do get that money and we're able to project and commit some local match through our budgeting process. So moving on to governance structure, you have all seen this before when we looked at the study last time, but just pulling this piece out to discuss with the MAP board, that we would like to migrate to this type of structure for you all, and have it be more of a transit technical advisory committee as well, rolled into the MAP coordinating board. So The current proposed members, if you look there, I put them down there, and my apologies to Jenica, I spelled finance wrong in Moorhead Finance Director. But this is so far what we're proposing. If there's any input from you, of course, it's welcome. But what we want to do is bump this up to a monthly meeting and have more day-to-day operation involvement and recommendations coming from this body. So that's what's being proposed. One other thing we want to do, every year we have different public hearings, one of them being for the 5307 money. We present a program of projects and bring it to the governing boards currently. We would like to make this new board and structure for the MAT coordinating board, we would like that to be the new board and body that we take those public hearings to, and we're able to bring forward our program of projects, route changes, things like that. So, so we are sticking with that for our proposed. This is a lot of information. I'm not going to just read it to you, but it gives you an idea through this process what we're looking at as far as how we want to allocate our costs across the board with the various, so City of Moorhead, City of Fargo, City of West Fargo, NDSU, the Moorhead colleges and universities, and how we want to look at splitting all the costs across the board, but the main entities involved in that are the cities and NDSU. So for example, our fixed route operations, we're looking at sharing costs based on revenue hours of the fixed route system. So we have those all identified, and we went through and looked at paratransit facilities, vehicles, mobility management, planning, all the functions that we do, and corresponding how we decided that we want to, or that we're proposing, we want to split those. Same with revenue sharing. What we're looking at is we're breaking those down into categories that you see listed there, and then we would allocate those revenues based on what we've got listed there. For example, when we, on fixed route, with our past sales and advertising, so that's incoming revenue, we would split those revenues based on ridership. Pretty straightforward. But it gets a little more complicated when you're looking at the actual FTA, Federal Transit Administration money coming, and the state aid that comes from North Dakota, and Minnesota has their own allocation. They would like their funds to stay in their individual states, so City of Minnesota, or I'm sorry, State of Minnesota, specifically for City of Moorhead and Dilworth, and conversely, State of North Dakota would stay in Fargo and West Fargo for operations. So,
Our finance people are working weekly to come up with this cost allocation plan and put in the numbers from the 24 budget and projecting out 25 budget so that we can bring in the study a better idea of how that'll affect each jurisdiction.
thank you. And what are our next steps? So what we want to do is meet, this would be more of an informal meeting with Fargo City Commission, West Fargo City Commission, Moorhead City Council. We are meeting with all the individual colleges and universities, the four main ones that we have UPass agreements with, and then NDSU that we also have a joint powers agreement with for the circulator buses in and around campus there. So we definitely have to have legal reviews throughout this process. As we're going along, there have been a lot of questions come up. For example, insurance. If we decide that we're going to bring all vehicles into the fleet and make it one fleet that we share across the river, how does that impact insurance coverage? Currently, we already actually do that with our paratransit vehicles. So Moorhead purchases paratransit vehicles, and then we incorporate them into the fleet that we use for service. And that is a metro-wide service, so we serve within city boundaries. And what we would do is, or what we currently do is we, City of Fargo, carry the insurance through NDERF. And if there's a situation or an accident or something that involves any of the paratransit vehicles, regardless of who owns them, NADERF is the insurance company that carries them. Fixed route is seeming to be a little more complicated than that. But, so anyway, that's just one example of what we're trying to work through. We want to develop joint capital plans so that currently Lori does hers, I do mine, and it feeds into all the planning documents and goes up, our transportation improvement program through MetroCog, all the state programs, federal programs. So when we do come in for a grant, everything's already in place and we know what we're looking at. And we have requested local match that has to be identified in the budget. It's quite the process. But doing a joint plan going forward so that we're, because the money now is going to be joint for capital purchases. So we want to make sure we identify in advance what we're looking at. And the transit development plan, like Lori was talking about earlier, is going to be very important to get a full plan in place. We want to adopt and finalize all that cost and revenue sharing we were just talking about. We're almost there. That one's taken us some time. We meet every week and go through all these details to get this. The 2025 budget is going to be coming up. I know Susan Thompson was telling us, she's the finance director for the city of Fargo. She was telling us at cabinet the other day that we will be starting that next week. So good times. But within that budget is when we want to look at any of the job descriptions and get approvals and go through our position evaluation committees and everything that has to be done internally. So then we also need to adopt a final governance structure that we were just talking about, develop a single joint powers agreement between the cities. Currently, we have a couple different ones. We would like to get that all together. That's one thing the consultant is going to be finishing for us. And then KLJ, again, the consultant, they will be presenting the full study to the MAP board for adoption. And then we will take it to each of the, like Fargo City Commission, Moorhead City Council, and West Fargo Commission for their approvals as well. And KLJ will be bringing that forward. Timeline for all of that to happen in order to be incorporated into the budget for 2025, it's coming up very fast. All of this will have to be finished and accomplished prior to, I would say, the end of June is what we're trying to do. So that is the end of what I had. And Lori, do you have anything else to add? Did we get it? I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, as you may recall from previous meetings, part of this new organization is because of my retirement at the end of the year and the fact that we wanted to have one organization moving forward. The Moorhead employees that are currently employed would either become contracted employees to Fargo or be offered a job in Fargo Transit to make that transition. And with that, we expect would have to be done before the end of the year as well.
Yep.
So there's a lot of steps to this yet. And the grants to the state of Minnesota are due at the end of June. That's why we need to have as much of this done before that. We have to submit our cost allocation plan and our full budget and details to MnDOT for grant funding by June 28th.
Yeah. The cost allocation plan has to be approved by the state of Minnesota and also by the Federal Transit Administration. So.
Okay, questions for Julie and Laurie from the board? Deb?
Thank you. Just a request. So the slide that you have proposed cost allocation and revenue sharing, I know you just mentioned that you'll be coming to our city council and city commission meetings. Would it be possible to add to that a side-by-side comparison of here's what we're proposing, but here's what we do now? Because I think I could say as a council member, I think that would be really helpful to be able to see. I mean, we want to kind of see the bottom line of what are we changing and how will it impact us?
Yes, and KLJ is working on that
Great.
with us. They're meeting with us on with our finance committees to pull that together. I am meeting with the Moorhead City Council Working Group on March 26th to present some of that information that we have.
Great, that would be helpful. Thank you.
And on the Fargo side, we're working to be at the May meeting. Commissioner, and Commissioner Strand, you're both familiar with that transition from the Finance Committee to the FAR Committee. So we're looking at bringing it to that group in May.
Other questions? All right, well,
Okay.
thank you for the update.
Thank you.
And we will move on to agenda item 3B.
So one of the things is that we have a lot of new members to the board, and we wanted to educate a little bit on some of the federal processes that new members might not be aware of, and just so that they understand how some of these things work. We've brought a couple of pieces to this meeting, and at the next meeting, we'll bring some more pieces just as an educational part of this. So, Sean.
All right, thanks, Lori. I'm going to talk about the paratransit application process. MAP Paratransit provides door-through first door transportation service on a reservation basis for individuals with disabilities who are ADA paratransit eligible and unable to utilize MAP bus fixed route service independently. MAP Paratransit features accessible vans and buses with wheelchair lifts. MAP Paratransit operates within the city limits of Moorhead and Dilworth in Minnesota and Fargo and West Fargo in North Dakota.
And if I could add to that, paratransit is a comparable service to the fixed route. It has to be complementary, operate the same hours, the same jurisdictional areas that we serve. And it has a lot of rules that come with ADA to make sure it's comparable.
So what is ADA? ADA refers to the Americans with Disability Act of 1990. The ADA law requires that transportation services such as MAP Paratransit be provided to persons with physical and mental disabilities who are unable because of their disability to utilize fixed route bus service without assistance. So MAP Paratransit is a shared ride service, which means the rider may not go directly to their destination without the driver stopping to pick up or drop off other passengers along the way. Paratransit provides over 200 rides per day. Driver schedules are designed ahead of time to accommodate these rides as efficiently as possible within the city limits of Moorhead, Dilworth, Fargo, and West Fargo. So applications are available on our website or at the GTC, or they can call and request one to be mailed to them. Applicants will be asked to provide the name of a medical or qualified social service professional who can verify their disability. Determination of eligibility will occur within 21 days of receiving the application, authorization form, and professional verification form. Once approved, the applicant will receive a letter of eligibility which indicates if they are eligible for MAP Paratransit. Their letter will note any conditions placed on their use of the service.
And so if I could add to that, so you might just be eligible conditionally. For example, someone in a wheelchair who might be able to get to a bus stop during a regular MAP bus stop during the summer months may not be able to get there in the winter months because the pathway has got snow on it, things like that. So I know that's one of the next things he's going to talk about is permanent, temporary, or conditional eligibility. But I just wanted to make sure that you understand that there are many different levels of eligibility. For example, some people may have a sight limitation, but only during hours of darkness. They could take the regular city bus during the day, but at night they could take paratransit service. Those kinds of considerations are directly passed down through the Americans with Disabilities Act. And so our application process, it mimics the law of what people are eligible for.
So qualification is based on the individual's functional capabilities rather than a specific medical diagnosis. Eligibility can be permanent, temporary, or conditional. If the applicant is considered eligible but only under certain conditions, the transit dispatcher will review each trip requested to see if that trip meets the conditions that were established when eligibility was determined. For example, a passenger may only be eligible for paratransit during the winter when snow and ice are present. In this example, during the summer, the passenger would not be eligible for paratransit. Conditions are identified in the eligibility letter.
And the eligibility letter is something that they can take when they travel throughout the nation because it follows the Americans with Disabilities Act. Those conditions apply anywhere that they travel.
So visitors to Fargo-Moorhead who have been certified as ADA paratransit eligible, or visitors who have not been certified as eligible by another public entity but claim they are ADA paratransit eligible, will be assumed eligible for up to 21 days during any 365-day period. If service is needed beyond the 21 days, the individual is required to apply for eligibility by the cities of Fargo or Moorhead. ADA paratransit eligibility is based on a functional rather than medical model. Persons are not qualified or disqualified on the basis of a specific diagnosis or disability. And an individual will be certified as ADA paratransit eligible if there is any part of the MapBus fixed route system in the designated service area which cannot be used or navigated by the individual because of a disability. As mentioned before, there's permanent, temporary, and conditional eligibility, as well as seasonal, which would also be conditional, and then transitional. The three categories of eligibility: the first one is unable to board, ride, or disembark. Any individual with a disability who is unable as a result of a physical or mental impairment, including a vision impairment, and without the assistance of another individual, except the operator of a wheelchair, lift, or other boarding assistance device, to board, ride, or disembark from any vehicle on the fixed route bus system, which is readily accessible to and usable by individuals with disabilities.
That can include someone with a mental disability who can't learn the bus routes, and so they can't travel independently. If they have a disability that they just can't remember which routes are going where and can't travel on their own.
Category 2, able to board, ride, and disembark only if the vehicle is accessible. Any individual with a disability who needs the assistance of a wheelchair, lift, or other boarding assistance device is able with such assistance to board, ride, and disembark from any vehicle which is readily accessible to and usable by individuals with disabilities if the individual wants to travel on a route of the system during the hours of operation of the system at a time, or within a reasonable period of such time when such a vehicle is not being used to provide designated public transportation on that route.
And all of our fixed route buses are accessible. All of them are. Like we have up to 2 wheelchair spots on all of the buses.
And that's something I emphasize during my travel trainer training, where we train individuals from different organizations to help their clients learn the MapBus system, is I do emphasize that our fixed route buses are accessible, and a lot of people don't realize that. So we always encourage people to try the fixed route system if they can, instead of using paratransit. And then category 3, unable to travel to boarding location or from disembarking location. Any individual with a disability who has a specific impairment-related condition which prevents such individual from traveling to a boarding location or from a disembarking location on such systems.
When we apply conditional eligibility, they might be close to a bus stop by their home, but they may not be close to a bus stop at their destination. Then someone with those kinds of conditions would be able to take paratransit for that trip.
Yes, on the application and also on the verification form, we do ask that they, if their disability affects their mobility, we ask so how far can you travel with the aid of a mobility device? Is it a half a block, 1 block? We have it broken out by feet as well, so we can get some idea of how far they can travel on their own with their mobility device.
And almost anybody with a mobility device is going to be eligible in the winter because of our conditions here.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And then finally, if the applicant wishes to appeal the eligibility determination, the following process should be followed. So individuals can appeal if they're given a conditional eligibility, or if they're denied eligibility, or if it's a temporary eligibility, they have a right to appeal that decision. So a written notice of the applicant's intention to exercise their right to appeal must be filed within 60 days of the date of the letter notifying an individual that they have been determined to be ineligible for ADA paratransit service. The applicant or his representative of their choice shall have the opportunity to be heard and present information and arguments in support of their position to the ADA Advisory Committee. A written determination of the decision on the appeal, including the reasons for such a decision, shall be forwarded to the applicant within 30 days of the completion of the appeals process. If a decision is not made within 30 days, the applicant will be determined to be temporarily eligible until such a time as a decision regarding the appeal is made by the committee. Typically, we don't see people, appealing. They usually, if I were to deny someone eligibility for paratransit, I let them know that, if they want to have another professional, maybe someone who's better qualified to answer the questions regarding their disability, that's typically what happens. They have someone else verify it. And then, then we can reevaluate their eligibility at that time. So, are there any questions regarding?
Mr. Chair. I have a question. So you said it's shared service for paratransit. You determine the best, most efficient routes possible in that shared service? What's the process for determining that?
Well, it's based on our scheduling software.
Okay.
So when people call in, they schedule rides, and then they optimize the schedules for the next day, and that should hopefully put the rides in an order that is most efficient. So some people might get picked up and dropped off right away, or they might get picked up and 2 or 3 other people might get picked up or dropped off along the way as well. So when we're scheduling rides for people, we do try to allow for that. So if someone has, say, a 9 o'clock appointment, they typically start looking for something around 8 o'clock because of that time that we take to pick up and drop off other people. So it's mostly done through the scheduling software as far as.
Thank you.
Yeah.
We do have operating rules about that too, that follow the Americans with Disabilities Act. It's supposed to be comparable to a trip on the regular fixed route bus system. We try not to have someone on board the bus more than an hour. If it's more than an hour, we consider that a lengthy trip, and we have to track that and try to limit those as much as possible. So there's a lot of little tweaks to that. We have a new software that we are currently implementing. It should hopefully be in place by June that will help with this process as well and improve on it, because they can also, instead of just saying, this is when I'd like to be picked up, or they can say, I need to be here by this time, and the software will back up and figure out using all our parameters, how that will work. Now, there's a little bit of more manual manipulation. The software isn't optimizing the job as much as we'd like to, but the new software is going to be a great improvement to that.
Great, thank you.
You mentioned you have 200 rides per day. What kind of capacity does that put you at? Are you at 80%, 90%, 110%? What kind of capacity does that put you at that kind of ridership?
Well, in the wintertime, we actually tend to go up to about 250 to 280 to up to sometimes almost 300 scheduled rides. With cancellation stuff, it usually drops down by that, but summertime it does hit around the 150 to 200 range. So, but yeah, so typically we have about 9 day vehicles out there, and then about 2 evening ones to accommodate the average, I guess, load. Some days at peak demand, we might put 1 or 2 extra vehicles out there to accommodate that. Yeah, so I'd say most average drivers have about 20 rides per day scheduled on their buses. Sometimes more, but yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions from the board? All right, we can move on to 3B2.
Thank you. Federal charter service. Last meeting we had, we talked about, can we add service to different events that might be happening in the community? And so we wanted to make sure that we educate on what the charter service federal regulations are. And so generally speaking, it's the federal government does not want its federally funded vehicles to compete against private charter companies. So if there is an exclusive bus, taking a group of exclusive people from one point to another point. And not like our paratransit demand response service, but a group says, hey, we'd like a bus from the college to here. We cannot compete with that. They have to go out to the charter bus companies and request that themselves first. And if there are no charter service companies that want to provide that service, we also have to document that we reached out to them and made sure there was no one that could provide that service before we can. There are some exceptions to that. If there's a community event, for example, that is something that the whole community is interested in attending, and we advertise it as being available, and we either don't charge a fare or just charge our regular fare, we can provide service in those circumstances as we make that available to connect with our regular MAT bus system and bring that transportation out. It does have to be during our normal jurisdictional areas that we serve. It has to be during our normal operational hours. For example, we don't operate Sundays right now. We can't put service out there for a special event on Sundays because we don't operate that Sunday service. This came into play a lot when we changed Link FM. Because a lot of times in the downtown areas, people were asking for service to events. And so they specifically told us not to just change our route over and over again based on where an event was, to try to keep our routes very steady and the same, and not be customizing those for different groups. Most of the time, when we do change our Link FM route for an event downtown, it's because there's a parade and there's roads closed. There's another event going on somewhere and there's a road closed, so we're working around that. And then the other thing is that, and I should probably move my slides. So there are other exceptions too, and that would be for official government business. For example, the city of Moorhead has a citizen government academy where they're teaching citizens all about how the services operate in the area or in Moorhead. And so they've asked us to provide bus service for some of those events where we then do a little educational piece on transit and then give them rides. Those are official government businesses where we have elected officials and employees of the city of Moorhead that are on those and arranging for those. We can do up to 80 hours annually of official government exceptions with the charter service and not be considered having to go out and find out if a charter will do that for us. So those are exceptions that Moorhead does use 2 or 3 times a year for special things going on in the community. We do have to log everything that we do like that. Every charter we do, we have to log and show that we've reached out if it's not one of the exceptions. And even for the exceptions, we have to record how many people we transported, how many of those were government officials, and how many miles we went, what vehicle we used, what we charged, and all of those kinds of details. And then we have to upload those periodically into the federal website so that they are aware of what we're doing. And they review that when they do our 3-year reviews to see that we're not stepping out of those charter regulations. We can also do charter for human service organizations, so nursing homes, elderly, and people with disabilities, and low-income individuals. If they meet certain requirements, we can also do special services for that, and emergencies and things too. We did provide service when we had flooding and we had to evacuate people. Those are usually human service organizations and also an emergency situation where we can put our vehicles out there and take care of that. So again, we have to serve our geographical area, and we cannot generate revenue. We cannot make a profit off any of that service, and we have to log that information in. So that's the charter service regulations. Do you have any questions?
Deb.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, and I was the one who brought this up at the last meeting. I wanted to know a little bit more about then how do we select for the Link FM, because I know I brought this up specifically. I believe last year our largest public event that we had in Moorhead was Pride in the Park, and it was the largest Pride in the Park event that we've had in our region. I think I can't remember how many thousands of people were at it. And of course, one of the issues at Bluestem was the congestion. And so we had so many people that were driving to it that people described it to me that for large parts of the day, that it was just a parking lot on the road. And so I think it would really benefit the public to have that as a link, and I know this is a bigger event than what we're using Link FM for Celtic Fest and some of the Blue STEM things. And so I think that would be a great use of public resources for something that is, again, huge turnout within our community. So if we wanted to have it for something like that, what would be the process?
Okay, so we have to have it paid for without using federal funds. We do have a 100% funded state bus, so we could use a state-funded bus to provide that service with the permission of MnDOT. We try to connect it to our fixed route service, so we do have Route 5 that services South Moorhead and has a shelter by the Azul Hornbachers. So when we do events at Blue STEM, like the Trollwood Play, we connect there and transport people back and forth. So normally, all of those services are put in our budget, and that's sent to MnDOT for approval. And so they've approved those episodic events. We give them a list of all of our Link FM events that we're going to do that we have budgeted for. If we're not drawing on the state funds to provide that service, and we don't ask for more money, all we have to do is ask for permission from the state to do that. And if it's federally funded, if we're using a federally funded bus, we can also ask the federal ombudsman for permission to do that. We've done that in the past for big events, and we've showed that this is a community-wide event, and we're advertising that we're available, and then the ombudsman can give us permission to do that as an event. So there's a little bit of a process. We are below budget on Link FM, for some of our events because some of them have been canceled in the past. And so there might be an opportunity there without having to go and ask, other than to say we want to use it and we won't cost the state more money. We can ask for that. So that is something we can do. No one has brought it to our attention in the past. So now that it's on our radar, we would want to reach out to whoever's planning that to find out, what kind of hours and such. When we do Trollwood, we usually like to have more than one vehicle. So there's one at the destination and one at the loading point over by Azul Hornbachers. So and when we do Trollwood, they have a private charter do one end of it and us do the other. So arrangements like that are helpful because they do show that they're reaching out to the private charter businesses to help. And they don't overburden us with our driver shortage to have more than one vehicle out there, especially event at one time. So yeah, we can definitely explore that one.
Great, thanks. It's very helpful. Thanks, Lori.
You're welcome.
Any other questions for Lori? All right, thank you, Lori. We'll move on to our last agenda item, 3C, the ridership for January and February. Cole and Lori.
Thank you. So we have seen a little bit of some of the trends that you can see here on the screen. First couple of months in 2024 in terms of ridership. We have kind of stabilized a little bit post-COVID, thankfully. I know our ridership was going up and down for a couple of years now, but I think we're kind of seeing a couple of nice trends across some of our routes here. So if you take a look, Route 11, Route 13 are both increasing. Route 11 is about 10% increase, 13 is 21%. As I had mentioned in the service changes information, we did suspend Route 36 to increase the frequency on Route 13. So I believe that's a portion of why we're seeing a pretty large increase there. Slight increase on Route 14 as well, and a slight increase on Route 15 of 4% and 10%. Route 16 is down a little bit, decrease of 21%. Route 16 does serve a lot of the same area that Route 15 does, so potentially adding the additional frequency to Route 15 is kind of detracted from using 16, so some people just jumping over to a different route to be able to get to the 13th Avenue, West Acres area. Slight increase in Route 17, about 1%. A bit of a decrease in Route 18, down about 10% from 2023 to 2024, and a slight decrease in 20, down about 8%. Route 18 services the southern portion of Fargo down to the 52nd Avenue Walmart, Osgood area, around there. Route 20 services the older part of West Fargo, kind of along some of their main stretches by West Fargo City Hall, West Fargo High Rise, that sort of thing. Route 24 has seen a pretty decent increase of about 16%. That services a portion of Fargo and West Fargo, the Sanford and South Fargo, and then going over to the Lights area in West Fargo. So nice to see a bit of a ridership increase there. We have only had I believe, one Link FM event so far this year.
Festival.
The Frostival. Previously last year we had 7 rides. I believe it was extremely cold last year. There was something that kind of detracted from that. So nice to see a little bit of an increase there of 400%. But unfortunately, we have seen a bit of a decrease in Industrial Park on-demand and NDSU on-demand services. Industrial Park a bit more so. With that, we did have our old app that we were utilizing last year, TapRide. We made a transition to a new app when TapRide was bought out in about March of last year, so I'm expecting that we'll see kind of those ridership numbers stabilize a bit. We did see an initial drop off once we switched over to that new app, so I think that it'll take some time to see that people unfortunately took a little bit to switch over. Similarly to the last couple of years, we are seeing paratransit trend upwards. I believe at the last meeting, taking a look at 2023's information, they're up about 3.5 or 4% for the year. So still seeing more people utilize the paratransit service. So more people with that door-to-door services that they can't ride fixed route. Taking a look at NDSU ridership trends, Route 31 is up slightly at 2.6%. Route 32 up fairly significantly at about 14%, about 3,000 additional rides there. The largest increase is definitely Route 33. As I mentioned before, that's the one that services Berry Hall and Cly Hall in downtown Fargo. So I'm just seeing more students utilize that service, most likely more students involved in the college business down there. Route 34 is a route that we saw a substantial increase last year. I believe it was 200 and some % compared to the previous year. So talked to a couple of folks up at NDSU, and we think that it's just kind of different student living situations. That's right up by Niskanen Hall on University. So just thinking some students are moving kind of from the southern portion of the campus up to that kind of northern portion. So that's why we saw that increase there, but looks like it's stabilizing a little bit. Saw about 11,000 rides so far in 2024. And then, as I mentioned before, NDSU on-demand down ever so slightly, down about 2%, but still seeing some pretty good ridership there.
Moorhead routes. Route 1 is the one that goes through Concordia College area, and we're up over 8% on that. Route 2 is the route that goes through MSUM campus, down 2%. Route 3 services Southeast Moorhead and the high school, and 20th Street South and a lot of the apartment dwellings along there, and that also travels fairly close to the colleges. And so people might be just living on the route rather than on Route 2 at 24%. So that's seen a considerable increase. Route 4, which is our shopping route, and also services Churches United for the Homeless and social services in North Moorhead, up 9%. Route 5, which is south of the interstate, down 19%. Route 5 and Route 2 are interlined, and so those two routes are connected, and they look like they're both getting a downward trend. And I'm not sure why that is occurring, but we'll look into that one a little bit further. And then Route 6 is our Dilworth route, and Route 9 is the southeast route that goes by Sanford, Menards, and that area of southeast Moorhead. So all in all, for January and February of 24, we have a 4.4% increase over those same months in the previous year. And we put up 2019 there, which is our pre-COVID number, so you can see, how close we are getting to recovering our ridership pre-COVID.
Yeah, as we had mentioned before with the service changes, we have seen an overall decrease in ridership. So especially on the Fargo side, that difference is a little bit shocking, but it is nice to see that from 2023 to 2024, even we are seeing an overall increase on both sides of the river. And then one other thing to mention with this too is about this time last year, we were having a pretty terrible winter, so that can influence ridership. The couple of days that we weren't able to run service, or we weren't able to run service reliably because of those icy roads and wintry conditions, we might see decreases in ridership during those days, but we may see overall increases due to people either not being able to walk or bike to their destinations. So there's a bit of a change when it comes to weather too and ridership levels. So taking a look at overall college ridership, fairly up across the board. NDSU saw about a 12.26% increase, about 10,000 rides compared to the previous year. Slight increase for MSUM at about 1%. The only college that we did see a decrease in ridership was Concordia at about a decrease of 3,000 rides or 12%. M-State is definitely one of the colleges that we've been seeing an increase in ridership over the last year, and continuing on to this year, increase of about 25% compared to 2023. And then NDSCS is one of the colleges that has the lowest levels of ridership, but a increase of about 16 rides there.
Moorhead Senior Ride for January and February. The Moorhead seniors are up 6%. The Dilworth seniors are down 37%, but overall Senior Ride is up 1%. So their recovery from COVID is actually moving. I think they're up to like 82% recovery. So they're really recovering rides. Dilworth seniors, maybe taking the Dilworth route, the fixed route more, because that service in Dilworth is up considerably on the regular fixed route. So there may be just fewer people. It could be that people have passed away. It affects Senior Ride considerably when elderly people go into nursing homes or pass away. And so sometimes you can see a trend there of just people who are moving into different facilities and such.
So again, kind of taking a look at pre-COVID compared to post-COVID levels of ridership. The light blue line that you'll see up top there is our 2019 ridership for January and February, comparatively to 2021 through 2024 below that. I will see that 2024 has seen a pretty substantial increase compared to when we first got out of the pandemic, even compared to 2023. 2023, you see that we saw a general decrease in ridership from January to February, but we're looking pretty stable here in 2024. I believe that's all we had.
All right. Any questions for Cole or Lori? Any other business from the board? Okay. Hearing none, we are officially adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.